thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to be sitting down with you. I think iconic is the word I would use. You're one of those names that comes up a lot in the community when I talk to others.
Iconic?
Yes.
I did not pay him to say that.
I think it's really funny because 3 of the last people that we sat down with all brought up your name.
3?
3.
Who was the third?
Yeah, Jim.
Oh, love Jim.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Stephanie and Hillary both said that you were instrumental to them and that they have a really strong relationship with you. So you're doing something right.
Thank you. It was really sweet to hear because I think as someone who doesn't come from an interior design background, I come from a marketing background, like you never fully know how you integrate into the community, but hearing people have lovely things to say and knowing that like I helped in some little way kind of makes it feel more, I don't know if real is the right word, but it's like, okay, I like made a difference somewhere.
Yeah, fulfilling.
Yeah.
And I think any project that we've ever been involved for your company over the years and any of your clients that we've met have also said the same thing, that you're a fantastic person to work with. So we really appreciate your time and we're looking forward to sitting down with you. Can you tell me a little bit about your background in marketing? I wonder if maybe some of that previous experience is what's fueled your success in this field.
Yeah, I would say the feedback that I've gotten is that, so my previous career was in marketing, I was in advertising, was creative director, been on the account side too and strategy. So like my role was always, how do we take a very nebulous, abstract idea and sell it to somebody and make them understand the idea and then produce the idea in a way where that one idea is going to work in all these different aspects of the marketing world.
Okay.
And so I think like kind of design to me is very similar, where it's like, how do we take this one idea and then sell someone on it who doesn't understand how to, speak that language, and then have pieces of that essence be reflected in the house in different ways. Like I think the process is very similar to me. But long story short, I remember vividly, I was like 11, 12 years in, I was like a year away from like like I was doing really well. And I just remember thinking, I did not want my boss's job. Like I was like, she looks miserable. Like I don't want her job. And then I was like, well, if I don't want her job, like what am I don't think this is the right thing for me. So I decided to segue into, first I tried to become an artist. I was a fine arts major in university. And then I kind of just stumbled upon design by way of one of my husband's colleagues asking me to help with her house. And I just said yes. And then I just started getting other people asking for help and I just kept saying yes. And so that's kind of how it all happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long ago did you start your design company?
I want to say 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're like 6.5, 7 years.
That's really impressive because you've won a number of awards in a short amount of time.
So I know marketing. I think that's also where it's really helped, where I understand like, the difference between kind of like just putting yourself out there and putting yourself in the best possible position to be able to do well in something, and the optics of how you submit and like the relationships you have to manage with like the different editors. And, I kind of know that world. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest assets that I've had. Because as someone who, again, doesn't come from a design background, I have people working that do, that obviously know what they're doing in that regard. And I've learned as well. It's really important to kind of like leverage what you know. And I think that was always a way for me to feel like I was attaining more of the credibility that I would otherwise have if I had a formal background. So that's kind of where I went to right away, where I was like, okay, well, I know how to do this. And so how do I get more exposure in that realm?
Very cool. With the entire sphere of marketing and design, can you tell me a little bit about how you position yourself differently than others in the market? And what is it that about your brand, about your designs that stands out, that makes you guys iconic or attractive and continues to bring business your way? Like, just tell me a little bit about the positioning and the way that you guys are set up to differentiate yourself in the market.
So I would say probably about 3 years in, I, had to sort of decide, what visual direction I wanted to take the company, right? Like, do I want to be known for executing a specific style very well and have that be like synonymous to my name, like a McGee and Co. or that Joanna Gaines, like they have a very specific style, or did I want to lean more into truly finding a way to reflect who the client was, which would then result in a much more diverse portfolio. And I think my background in client service, like that's always kind of what I excelled in, right? Because I would say, like, as a designer, you can't take what the client says at face value. Because if they knew exactly what to say, they wouldn't hire you. Right. They would just go and do it. And so you're always like sifting through and trying to find like little nuggets of insight where it's like, you said this, but your body language told me this. So I know I need to dig deeper. So that just kind of really aligned well with kind of what I was happy to do and what I was good at and what brings me joy, which is really unlocking something inside of someone that they don't know. And so I leaned into that. And then I think we just kind of got to be known for creating more distinctive spaces. That's sort of the word that I like to use because I think our original kind of like purpose line was creating distinctive spaces that capture distinctive people. So it's like, how do we reflect a distinct quality about someone who's distinct to begin with? Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. And I think, ultimately, if it comes down to a skill of communicating someone's uniqueness or style, the skill of, like you said, reading them, their body language, and parsing out those nuggets of inspiration is really what it is. When you're in those conversations with clients, is it like very fluid, or is it more of a rigid process that you're going through to be able to extract that design intention and that scope that you're working towards?
Fluid is a really good word because that's a word that I use both aesthetically and also just in our process and how we like navigate the business world. Everything I do is fluid. I don't think that there's one specific way to do something. Like we definitely are process driven, but I think depending on the client and what you're getting from them, because I think that the briefing process is like a dance, right? Like you can't just do one thing and expect the same result. And if you're not getting the right answers, then that kind of impacts your ability to like do your job.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always like, looking at it from different ways where it's like, okay, these questions I'm asking, they're not working. So let's look in your closet, right? Like you tell me you want this, but you have like an avocado dress. So it's like, that's telling me something very different. Like show me like, who are your favorite artists, right? Like, what are your favorite TV shows? I once had a client who, she just bought a brand new home. It was like very modern, very neutral, like very kind of West Coast inspired. And I was in the briefing with her and she just kept saying that she wanted more of that. And there was like something that wasn't fitting, like it wasn't clicking for me. And so her favorite show was like RuPaul's Drag Race. And then I went to her closet and I said, show me your favorite garment. And she literally pulled out a dress and it had like avocados all over it. And I just said, there is something that is misaligned here. Like you telling me that this is what you want and your favorite things, I'm not seeing a correlation. And it turned out that she didn't think it was possible to add that level of personality into her house and make it work.
In that space, yeah.
In that space. And I think when we figured it out, I was able to make it work, right? We had like a giant tiger mural that like expanded 2 sections of the fireplace because she loved cats. And it's like, we made it work, but I needed to really do that digging. And if I just relied on listening to what she was saying and not asking any questions, I probably would have done something cool, and she would have liked it, but I don't think it would have hit in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's really neat. And I'm kind of seeing a bit of a connection now between your marketing background and the design world, because like with brands, you were doing the same thing and figuring out how to communicate their values and what's distinct and unique to them. And now you're doing the same thing with people.
I think it's actually the exact same thing because ultimately people are behind brands.
Right.
So I think that's the secret.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're pretty involved in the design community, attending events and going to trade shows and product knowledges and partnerships and all that kind of stuff. How important do you think it is to be involved in the community today? And do you think that we're going to continue to see the community come together in a more cohesive way? Or do you think we're going to continue to kind of see these fragmented pockets like the way it's been the last 20 years?
So I have the luxury of not knowing how it's
Ah,
supposed to be. I think part of my background, part of like what was actually quite good about it was that I didn't know what to not do right. I
right.
just kind of did things the way that I thought and the way that I thought made sense and how I would approach it in the business world. So yeah, I would say I think I've heard and I just know because there's different designers across the country that I think Calgary specifically, like we have a very open group. And I've always believed in sharing information. Like I think that there's enough of everything to go around. It's not what are they? It's like not a zero sum game.
Yeah.
Is that the right? Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's how it works. It's like just because I landed this partnership doesn't mean that there's no more left for you. Like, so I've just found that being open with that then makes other people be open. And then we're kind of all just sort of like helping each other. Like, we're smart enough to know that like obviously there is some crossover with clients sometimes, but I genuinely believe that like if somebody wants to work with me, they should work with me. And if they want to work with this designer, they're better off working with that designer and me not trying to take that client. Like it just wouldn't come to the same result.
Gotcha. When it comes to working with clients and some of the different personalities and the best fit, what are some of those best fits for you? I know you work for luxury home builders and production home builders and residential clients. Do you guys do commercial? Like, tell me a little bit about your client base. Who do you prefer to work with? Does it not really matter the sector that they're in? It's more about the best fit between personalities. Like, just talk to me a bit about your clients.
It's definitely evolved. So starting out, it was definitely like more residential because a lot of the clients I got were just from like, my partner's colleagues and they'd refer the same kind of people. Um, and then in the past couple of years, I've gotten a lot more into working with developers and for multi-unit as well, which I actually really enjoy. I would say I enjoy both, but in different ways. Like residential is very emotional as it should be. Like I'm building a house right now and like I'm probably the worst client I've ever had because everything
To
is so
yourself or
to
to the
myself.
builder?
Yeah, I would have fired myself like long ago if I had myself as a client because you're so emotional,
Yeah.
right? But when you're working on commercial and you're working with developers, like it's a lot more objective.
Mhm.
It's like this is your demographic, right? This is your budget. I've made this work and this is how it's going to benefit you. This is your return on investment. And it's like, yeah, great, check, check, check. Whereas with homeowners, there's more of that kind of like, it should work on paper, but it's not. So let's figure out why. Like, why are you feeling this way? So I would say a healthy balance of both is kind of the right zone for me. I definitely like not having all residential clients, but I would miss it too
Right.
because there's a personal quality
That
to it.
personal
Yeah.
touch. Yeah. What are some of the goals that you guys have for the design firm for the next 1 to 5 years? Like where are you hoping to develop the business in what direction?
So that's a very interesting question because I'm actually in the midst of kind of going through that right now. Like, we've been really lucky in that, like, we've been putting stuff out there and it's been landing. So that's been really awesome. Um, Before I segued into interior design, my goal was actually to always kind of be in lifestyle design because the marketing piece of my background and my love for beauty and creating things that like can resonate with people and sort of really just having an aspirational kind of like presence in the world lends itself quite well. So we're currently in the midst of creating a lighting line. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know if you can see,
Is
but
that this
there's
right here?
yeah, there's one of them
Beautiful.
there. Yeah, it's called the Neige collection, which is a palindrome for my late father.
Okay.
His name was Jian,
Yeah.
so Naig, J. So that's been really exciting. That's sort of been like a year in the works.
Very cool.
And so yeah, still going to be doing beautiful designs, working with people. Definitely want to work more in hospitality. I think
Okay.
it's like such a cool space to really like you know, to take the essence of a brand and really like physically personify it, which is I think fits quite well with my background.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, definitely dipping my toes into like lifestyle design. And I'm very excited about what that's going to be. I don't fully know yet. So I guess we'll see.
Okay. So on the product design and lifestyle design, when we were talking off camera, you had said that, from a young age, you have always been intrigued by beauty and visual representation and the visual space. Tell me a little bit about that kind of realization that you want to be affecting the real world through the visual medium. Like, how did you come to that realization that I really just want to be manifesting these ideas or the concept of beauty in a physical world? Like, when did you know that that was what you wanted to do?
It took a while. I've had multiple careers.
Okay.
I still believe that I'm going to be in a Marvel movie at some point. Like
Sweet.
literally, like I'm like, I want to be in that world. So that's going to happen later on. But I think it was in the past sort of 2-3 years, like, I'm in my 40s now.
You
So
don't look a day past
thank you
32.
so much. I feel like that was something, I think that comes with age a little bit, right? Like where you can sort of separate like, what do I think I need to do? What do people expect me to do? What do I actually want to do? Does what I want to do kind of match with what the expectation of me is to do? And I think as I was doing some, because I think year 5 we're doing really well, and I kind of like started planning and figuring out where we're going to go, and I really thought about like, what do I actually want? Like, what makes me happy? What would I do for free? And it's this notion that you talked about of like, I've managed to kind of consolidate it into sort of a line, which is, I think my purpose in life is to realize beauty, because I'm always looking for beauty in everything that I see. Like whether it's like finding a beautiful way of reflecting a part of someone who they didn't think was deserved a voice, or finding a way that a piece of artwork can completely transform a space. Shears, finding a way that the beauty that the light brings into a space, right? Like I'm always finding I'm always looking for ways to realize beauty and find and sort of like showcase beauty that already exists, because I don't think there's anything more beautiful than like someone who is fully connected to who they are. And, despite their size or their hair color or how it is, like when you see someone locked into who they are and the essence is like, it's so personified and it's so authentic. I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And I think if, as like this is going to be a little bit like pie in the sky, but I think realizing beauty is what can change the world. Always trying to find the beauty in things is a way of shifting the overall like cadence of the world right now, which is kind of crazy.
And I think you said something there about authenticity and being one's authentic self, and there being beauty and being completely locked in. And I think that's something that's missing today in general, in a lot of different realms, but especially in the design and construction world, where people, I find, are often out there for profit and not necessarily to make a change to impact someone's mental health or the way they feel about themselves or the space. What do you think separates the great designers from the good designers, or the great developers from the good developers? Do you think it's that integrity and that authenticity and that intention, or do you think it's really just about like the product that they ultimately deliver at the end? Is it the energy and the intention that goes into the process for a designer or a developer, or is it just the product that shows up at the end of the line? Or is it something completely different than either of those?
I think there's different aspects. I think like the aspirational part of it, it definitely makes a difference, right? If somebody is trying to create something that is more than just the sum of its parts, where like it can impact people on a bigger level. I think on more of like, technical is not the right term, but on more of like a practical level, I think that it's the designers and the developers that are always creating from a place of truth. What I mean by that is like when I'm doing a briefing with a client, I'm always looking for insight. Like, what is a nugget of true insight that I can use as a catalyst to create something from that insight? Because I think if you're just designing anything with a preconceived notion of what you think it should be, you're kind of leading everyone to the answer that you want. But if you're open to really like just sort of like being super curious and like, almost hungry for discovering the truth, I think that's when really beautiful design happens, right? And that goes from on both the designer side and the developer side, because I think they should be looking for a nugget of truth too, and why they're creating this lifestyle, right? Or this building or this complex. Like, what's the point of it? Like, it has to be more than money. Like, money matters, but I think that's the difference between like something that really lands and the difference between a customer and creating a fan.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a story about a time in the last 6 years where you had that aha moment or uncovered a piece of truth?
I gave my avocado example already. That was
That's your go-to. Besides the avocado dress.
Let me think. Can we come back to that one?
Of course.
'Cause that's always the first one that I use. And now I need to like use a different one.
Yeah,
We'll come
absolutely.
back. Okay.
So then let's talk a little bit loosely.
Oh, I have one.
Yes, please.
Okay. So it just came to me. So this is not the same thing, but okay, it's kind of like, it's not an aha moment, but it's an example of like insight, right? Like whenever we're doing like furnishings and decor, often we do space planning first before I do anything creative, because I want to understand how someone actually lives in their home. Because I don't think you can really create a space for someone if you don't really get how they use the space, which is probably very different than how you might assume they use a space or you might use a space. And so an example that I always give to a lot of clients when we're talking about functional planning is like, I have a lot of clients say, I have a great room and then I have a dining room and they're connected and they're open, and like when my friends or family finish having dinner, like they won't go into the great room. Like I can't get them to go. They just stay at the dining room table. And then I'll go, through their house and take a tour, and I'll say, okay, well, you have the back of the couch like facing the dining room, right? So you're actually telling people like, I don't want you to come in here. Like we're creating a divide, like a physical barricade. Right. So if you actually want the people to use the space in that way, then it's like you need a day bed, or you need armchairs that swivel to like redirect the attention into that room. And that's just an example of like something that doesn't have anything to do with sort of like your perception of what it actually needs to be. It's like, this is the truth. It's a nugget of insight that is reflective of how you want the space to be used. And I'm going to use that as a starting point to then craft around it. Not really an aha moment, but it's more like, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, where there's like truth versus perception versus like preconceived notions.
Right. What do you think is the primary value that an interior designer brings to the design and construction process? Do you think it's finding that truth? Is it setting the aspirational goals for the project? Is it the technical, more practical or pragmatic, project management and organization? Like what, I know it's all of those, but if we had to pick one thing that a designer or a decorator brings to a construction or real estate project, what do you think that is?
I think it depends on the designer. And I think that's why, like, with my previous statement of saying there's enough to go around, like, I think every designer
and the client need.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like there's some designers that, are just so technically proficient, and they're like, they have so much experience, so much knowledge, they're certified. And for a large scale commercial project, like you need that level of expertise and that detail to go into that.
Right.
And then you have designers who are more kind of like fluid, or like are really good at sort of understanding what people are really trying to say, and like can read between the lines. And that's more of a, nod to kind of like understanding what people really want. So I think it's all of the above. Like, I know that's kind of like a cop-out answer. I think for me, it's sort of, I think when working on, let's use new builds for an example, right? Like clients always say, when should I bring in a designer? And I always say, like, as soon as possible, right? Because your architect and your builder and your designer, we're all looking for different things, right? Because we all know different things. Mm-hmm. So from an architect standpoint, having the, opening sort of like in this certain way might be a beautiful sight line. but then I'll say, okay, but if I'm putting furniture and you have the TV along this wall, like you can't actually access that there's no access point into the deck, so that actually isn't going to work like for this family. Like we need to think about it differently. And then like the contractor or builder might say, well, this design you did is great, but if we did it this way, we could save so much time and money. So it's like, I'm super open to that, where it's like if we can still sort of get across the same overall purpose. Like I'm way way more about that than I do. So I think we all bring different sort of things to the table, and we're all looking for different things that are specific to how we interact with our clients.
And ultimately, it's that collaboration between all four, the homeowner, the architect, the developer, and the designer, that leads to a successful project.
Yeah, like I don't think it's ever going to be beneficial to throw someone under the bus, because it's like you're in this together. Like, so if you create a bad like vibe with this person and you haven't figured out how to work together, it's not going to go away unless you like extricate yourself from the project, or someone leaves and then someone new has to start and they don't know the history. And so it's just not a good, like, that's just never a good solution. Like you need to just work together to figure out how to deliver something that's going to work the best. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices, like from your part for the overall benefit of the project. So I think it has to be like, there has to be that dialogue happening.
And being willing to make sacrifices and to have open communication is critical. What are some of the values or the personalities or some of the things that you've seen over the years from people you have collaborated with as architects, as developers, or as trades, that have led to successful projects over time? Like, what are some of those recurring values or things you see these people doing that you're like, I like working with Sonata, or I like working with this builder, or I like working with, this specific architect because they do X? Like, what are those things?
I would say like sort of lack of ego. That's a really important one, because ego just like clouds judgment, and it prevents you from seeing sometimes the objective truth. So the best relationships I've had are when everyone is sort of just looking to like deliver the best project. And I might have, come out with an idea and I thought it was amazing. And then after hearing from two other experts, these are the reasons why it's not going to work.
Not gonna fly, Louis.
I'm not going to die on that sword, right? There's no point in me doing that, right? And also, like, I'm going to learn something new by understanding why that's not going to work in their realm and their key parts of bringing the project to life. So I think lack of ego. I just think the best idea should win, like always, whether it's here or somewhere else. I think communications is a big one. This is something that I learned where my background was in client service, and I had a role where being able to verbally communicate like an abstract idea and be very clear about parameters and like be very clear about scope and like clarifying was just part of how we did business. Like you just had to work in that way. And I just assumed that this industry was the same, and it's not the same, because we're taught different things in school, right? So a lot of the people I've had work with me are from the MRU program, and so they know a lot about certain aspects, but in terms of like project management, in terms of like client communication, like that's stuff that you kind of only learn along the way. So I think working with somebody who is a skilled communicator, both verbally and both like written, and also understanding like when is it appropriate to like have a 5-minute phone call versus sending out a 4-paragraph email that's like it's like, that's, if you want to get something figured out, like that's not the right move.
Right.
Like nobody wants to read a novella like in an email, right? So I think communications and the art of communications is like a huge attribute and plus.
Awesome. As you like strive forward in your career and go into this realm of lifestyle design and product design, what do you think are going to be some of the principles that you're hoping to be remembered for? Or what's the legacy that you would want Louis Duncan-He Designs to be remembered for?
I think I want to be remembered as like, honestly, being a nice person.
Well, you've already done that, so.
Okay, well, that's good. Because, we're not like happy all the time. But yeah, I think like sort of operating with some sense of integrity and like standing up for your values when you need to.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's easy to stay silent, and sometimes it's like easy to not say the right thing, especially when there's hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. And I've come across a couple of those moments where I was able to kind of like, do what I needed to do at the time. Um, and yeah, like at the end of the day, it's like being able to like look in the mirror and go, I think I did the right thing. Like I did the right thing despite what I could have done. And so I hope that that value carries across my career in that regard, because that's somebody worth knowing.
Mhm. Well, and I think that somebody who has truth and authenticity as core values, that's 100% going to happen. So I think you'll be doing that.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard because there's a lot of other things at play. And it's like, this is the much easier direction. But yes, I think that that's the goal.
Very good. Very
Yeah.
cool. Guys, what other questions do we have?
That's awesome. Did you design a building in Curry Barracks?
I did, yeah.
So do you mind talking about some of the pieces in there?
Yeah, so I'm currently working with the Rohit group.
Okay.
So we're working on, we created sort of designer interiors for all of their properties across North America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So they're a North American developer that you're working with?
Yeah.
And you're doing their designs for like all of the specifications in the units, or is it the lobbies? Is it?
All of the above.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we sort of created like 3 designer interiors that they apply across all of their assets,
Very cool.
whether it's like, multi-unit or single home. And then if we're doing a multi-unit residence, then we also are doing the common areas. And the goal is to have something reflective of the actual environment in the common area, right? So in Curry, there's like a slight military skew.
Right.
And then in University District, there's like a different skew as well. So we're doing 2 buildings in Curry, 2 in University District with some townhouses, and then we're doing a bunch of, community like Sora, like throughout the city.
Cool.
Yeah, it's been fun.
That's awesome. And then in that specification package, like, are you guys doing everything? Like you're setting what paint supplier, flooring, tile, like are you building all of the specs or just the design and then their procurement team does that?
We work really closely with their procurement team.
Okay.
So like they've basically brought me on. So we've been working together for almost 3 years to kind of be the gatekeeper
Okay.
of the design. So like there's obviously budgetary constraints that I'm not going to have that much of a vested value in as they are, because they have to, it has to work for them. So, you kind of say, okay, it's really important for in these finishes to have this kind of quality. Like, show me some examples right within the right price
From
point.
the suppliers.
Yeah, from the right supplier, and so we're kind of like, and we will make recommendations where it's like, okay, this could be, you should talk to the supplier, like this, they might be a really good fit for you. So we don't like control it, but we definitely work really closely with procurement, with sales, with marketing, with design, because ultimately, like we want to deliver the right holistic kind of product.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Chris?
What are some trends or technologies that are up and coming in the space that have you a little bit excited?
Some trends and some technologies.
Trends or technologies?
What are some? Got it.
I'm going to bypass technology.
Yeah. So Louis doesn't love technology.
No, I do not.
So what are some current trends in the design world that you're excited, or trends that you've seen that give you the ick?
I'm going to talk about good things because I don't want to make someone feel bad about something I don't like, which might work for them. I think we have like the work is quite varied, but I think a consistency that I see in my work objectively is that there's always kind of like an organic moment. There's usually a fluid shape somewhere. I love adding tension into a space by having dichotomies. So we're definitely moving into like an earth toned realm, which like is right up my alley, right? Like burgundies and browns and merlots, like they're really happening right now. Like they're really hot colors. So that just naturally aligns with like who I am as a person. So I'm excited about the skew from the cooler tones to the warmer undertones. I think that my philosophy is that after the pandemic, we just want to feel a little bit more like connected to nature and a little bit more safe. And objectively, having a cool tone doesn't elicit those feelings immediately.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Well, actually, funny enough, so we had talked about earlier that your name's come up in a couple conversations with designers in terms of the things they've learned from you from a business perspective and a process perspective. So maybe just tell me a little bit about some of the challenges or failures that you experienced early on in your career, how you overcame those challenges, and then the things that you've done since to continue to iterate and get better every day.
I think standardization is something that you have to consider because unless you want to work on your own forever, like it doesn't matter how well you know something. You have to be able to like kind of not replicate it, but you have to be able to have procedures in place that like can kind of get you to a consistent result.
Right.
So I learned the hard way of like holding things too tightly to me. I think anyone who runs a business is like pretty type A. Like I just think you kind of have to be. And so it's sort of understanding like when you need to let something go, and also when something you can spend any amount of time on anything, but when is it not worth your time to be putting your energy, your emotional energy into one thing that in the grand scheme of things like might not make a huge difference. So I think I've made a lot of mistakes in that regard, like just holding on to things that you just need to let go of. Lot of learnings in I would say a big learning for me is also setting parameters with clients,
Like boundaries,
because
expectations of behavior and communication.
yeah, because like we're not just designers, like we're project managers too. Every designer is kind of a project manager, and the art of project management is so different than the art of design, right? And I think when you're a little bit more junior in project management, your thinking is that the way to run a good project is to make the client happy at all costs.
Right.
And that is not the way to run a good project, because you have to manage the client and you have to manage expectations and you have to set like a framework for parameters as soon as you can so that people understand how you're going to guide them through this process, right? And you have to tell them when you're going above and beyond, and saying respectfully, like, we're doing this, we're happy to do it, but it's because of this. And so at least clients understand like what the norm is. Right. I think where you get into this dangerous territory is when you don't ever say anything and you don't set parameters, and then it becomes an expectation, and it's not their fault. It's because you haven't like properly communicated to them what the standard should be, and you haven't managed their expectations. And so I found as I've progressed that most clients like respect you more and they trust the process more when you do give them a framework, and you can kind of like just be very respectful and honest about what's in the best interest of the job, and like what are things we can do and what are things we can't do, and what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. And I just think that yields a better project. So I learned that the hard way by saying yes at first.
I'm still learning that the hard way.
I mean, it's a tough one. Yeah.
What else, guys?
Do you guys have the time?
It is it's 2 on the dot.
Okay.
Oh my God, I have to go.
Okay.
Bye, Lewis. Sorry.
No, perfect timing. Thank you.